In animation, a Microsoft logo bursts into clear concentric windows. Colorful rounded fabric squares converge, spiraling upward. Microsoft. Ability Summit. Accessible technology within reach. How to break down the barriers to accessing assistive tech. Ioana Tanase.
Hello, and welcome to our session focused on accessible technology within reach. Today, we will be speaking about how to break down the barriers to accessing assistive technology. My name is Ioana, and I'm an accessibility program manager here at Microsoft. As I'm dyslexic, I have a very personal relationship with assistive technology, which over the years made many things possible for me. I also want to welcome our esteemed panelists to this conversation and ask them to introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Bernard Shira. I am the director and co-founder of Global Disability Innovation Hub's Innovate Now, which is Africa's first assistive tech accelerator. And we work to increase innovation for assistive technology that is relevant in emerging markets. I am delighted to be with you to share my experience professionally and also with lived experience as an AT user.
Hi, I'm Vidya and I run two organizations, Vision Empower and Wemby Technologies, both of which are working to make education accessible and inclusive for children with visual impairment, especially STEM education, and I'll be talking about all of these more during my talk. I'm really excited to be talking today at this event.
Hi, my name is Steve Hodges. I work as a researcher for Microsoft, and I work with different types of hardware technology, different types of device. I'm excited to be here to learn and to share what I know about assistive technology devices.
Thank you all, and thank you for being here today. We know that people with disabilities often do not have access to assistive technology, despite an increased need for it. It is estimated that 1.3 billion people will require assistive technology by 2050. That's a staggering number. Now, there are plenty of challenges. Lack of locally relevant technology, ineffective distribution channels, high cost, policy and procurement issues, as well as other intersectional factors such as poor internet connectivity. All these just represent some of the friction points. Now, not having access to assistive technology can also increase the gap in societal inclusion for people with disabilities. As an example, a child who's blind or low vision cannot have access to proper education if their school books are in a format that is not accessible, or if they don't have the right tools to participate, such as braille displays or screen readers. We can imagine the same experience for a working adult. For somebody like me who is dyslexic, text-to-speech technology often makes it easier to consume written content. Now, at the same time, technology that is overly complex and doesn't allow for ease of use can further restrict adoption. Simple solutions are the best. One of my favorite examples is the Microsoft Adaptive Kit, now presented on screen. It makes it easier for users to navigate their PC through keycap labels, 3D stickers, port indicators, and openers. Again, if like me, you have to mark down certain keys with nail polish or spend a lot of time trying to figure out what cable goes where, this certainly makes for a smoother experience. Now, all this being said, let's go back to an earlier point. At the core of adoption of assistive technology is local relevance, with many intersectional considerations, such as culture or language. Bernard, as an assistive technology tech accelerator, Innovate Now has a unique opportunity to identify trends, challenges, and innovation in Africa. Can you tell us more about it?
A beaming child wears a VR headset.
Thank you. So when we set out Innovate Now in 2019, the idea was to establish an inclusive innovation ecosystem. What this means is a community of practitioners, entrepreneurs, innovators, and most importantly, persons with disabilities. And since then, we have gone ahead to launch a community of problem solvers who look at assistive technology from a lens of local relevance and global scale. As we know, disability is a global need, and the need for assistive technology is also increasing exponentially. Where I come from, Nairobi, Kenya, lack of access to assistive technologies is a major gap, whether that's across mobility, vision, hearing, even the most basic of assistive products. What compounds this problem is the advancing rate of technological access for all services, including education, work, and others. And so we have seen models of innovation that consider these two aspects of the physical world and the digital world. We work with the support of the Global Disability Innovation Hub with local partners such as Kilimanjaro Blind Trust Africa, who have the local relevance or experience working in communities of persons with disabilities. And this has been very important for us. Now, when you look at the idea about disability innovation, it is one that requires a multidisciplinary approach. And therefore, the Global Disability Innovation Hub is an academic research center and practice center as well that drives disability innovation for a fairer world. And over the last 6 years, has worked across 41 countries and reached 28 million people, mainly through partnerships. GDI Hub is based in UCL, University College London, and it is the world's first collaboration center for assistive technology with the WHO. Now, in 2019, we launched our flagship project, the 80-20-30 project, whose purpose has been to test over the last 5 years what works to improve access to life-changing assistive technology. And we have learned a lot. Our accelerator is delivered in partnership, and partnerships make things possible in the domain of disability and assistive technology. Now, I want to tell you a little bit more about Innovate Now and why it's a unique model. When we started out, disability innovation was a term not heard of in this part of the world. And when I joined Global Disability Innovation Hub as a co-founding director, these are the two words that I fell in love with. In my former life, I worked with entrepreneurs in all fields, as I used to be working in a university incubator. And therefore, for me, it was obvious that the time had come for disability innovation. Therefore, when we launched in 2019, our ambition was to provide a platform for entrepreneurs, innovators, and researchers, as well as experts to come together and co-create this inclusive innovation ecosystem. And having started out with 5 ventures in our first cohort, today we've reached more than 100 founders who have been part of 45 assistive technology startups, and that is across 11 nationalities, including African countries, the US and the UK. And we are very proud to be leading one of the fastest growing assistive technology innovation ecosystems by number of founder and assistive technology solutions built for emerging markets, targeting affordability and quality. Now, you might be wondering what have been the main challenges in Africa, in Kenya, and in most developing countries when it comes to the intersectionality of disability and accessibility. And I want to tell you a little bit about this. Obviously, our priority is access to assistive technology because this has been a dire need. We all know that the world is quickly accelerating towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. But in 2018, at a flagship conference called the Global Disability Summit, it was discovered that the Sustainable Development Goals will remain but a mirage if we do not quickly and radically include persons with disabilities. And having identified the lack of access to assistive technology as one of the dire needs in emerging markets, this became an area of priority. And we have seen this need across, as I mentioned before, the physical and the digital worlds. And that takes me to my next point, which is lack of accessibility. Now, unfortunately, the world was not designed for people with disabilities. And over centuries, and I would say even millennia, we have built a very inaccessible world, meaning that if you have a limitation due to a health condition, you will interact with multiple barriers. And this has been the situation for most of the built infrastructure, for the transportation system, as well as the digital world that we are now working and living, as well as playing in. Lack of education and work opportunities is one of the main pressing needs for persons with disabilities. And this is, of course, made complex by the lack of accessibility and assistive technology. And we all know that without proper legal policy frameworks, it is difficult to implement and enforce the rights to assistive technology and other rights of persons with disabilities. And while Kenya has been very progressive to implement the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, there is still quite many gaps in policy across many sectors to make sure that disability laws are not standalone laws, but are integrated in everyday life. Now, I want to speak a little bit about something that is dear to our hearts. Now, when I talked about the inclusive innovation ecosystem, one of our principles is this idea of co-design and innovation with persons with disabilities. And why is this important? It is because persons with disabilities are need knowers. We know best what our challenges are. And most of the time, we are looking for an opportunity to be part of the solution. So when you unleash the power of empathy and the power of knowing the need by working closely with persons with disabilities, you end up developing solutions that really work not just for persons with disabilities, but for everyone. And why is this? Because we can offer some of the deepest levels of empathy that is required in the innovation process. The other important aspect when it comes to solutions for persons with disability is representation. And I know we have all heard about the adages, nothing without us, nothing about us without us. And this is the very nature of representation, because to be truly authentic, persons with disabilities must be on the table and must be leading initiatives that address their needs. So when we build and apply this principle of co-design, we can truly begin to unlock a world that is accessible for everyone. Now, you might be asking yourself, why did we start Innovate Now and what was the inspiration? I think by now you might have picked up a few ideas why, but I want to really just emphasize that we wanted to offer a platform for collaboration, co-design, and a place where true disability-led innovation can work. And we also provide access to entrepreneurship education to build the foundations of anyone who wants to build sustainable market-driven solutions for assistive technology. And we believe this is important because in this day and age, entrepreneurship has changed because we have the potential to leverage on digital, the power of digital, to reach all those that need assistive technology. And this also introduces new opportunities, new business models that can be leveraged to deliver the impact for assistive technology in the lives of persons with disabilities. So being the first assistive technology accelerator in Africa, we are extremely delighted to be working very closely with entrepreneurs. And we know that even in history, when we look back at how humanity has solved most of the problems that we have, entrepreneurship has always been at the heart of it. And that is why it is so important to ensure that persons with disabilities, AT innovators, can tap onto this power to build sustainable solutions. Now, I wouldn't leave you without giving you a taste or an example of some locally relevant innovations. Now, one of my favorites is an innovation that has demonstrated the idea of being locally relevant and also globally scalable. I'm talking about Hope Tech Plus, who have gone ahead to build one of the world's first wearable devices for visually impaired, uh, for persons with visual impairment, to give them more capabilities of freedom and movement in a world where it is possible today to tap onto the power of artificial intelligence, computer vision, and haptics. And this technology is disrupting how we've imagined mobility and access to information for visually impaired people. Why is this exciting? Because it is a solution from Kenya to the world, and we have worked with them from their very early stages until now. And hopefully by the end of this year, they will be launching in Europe and specifically in the UK and Austria. I want to talk about science media as well. Now, we live in a digital information age. Have you ever asked yourself in this age how persons with disabilities access information, especially entertainment and news? Now, television, the world over, broadcasts in the language of the majority. But Science Media was the first company in Kenya, and I believe in Africa, to broadcast in sign language with voice as an override. And this has been to advance access to digital information, news, and entertainment for persons who are deaf. And 2 years ago, this company also launched a product at the height of COVID called Assist All. And this was to enable persons who are deaf or hard of hearing to have on demand access to sign language interpretation service. So think of this the way you think of calling an Uber. And this is possible today in Kenya to the extent that during our last general election, this solution was used to help persons who are deaf and hard of hearing to vote. And this innovation is going to be featured in an upcoming summit called the Zero Project in Austria, demonstrating the participation of persons with disabilities in politics. And lastly, I want to talk about a solution that I love because it touches on so many aspects of impact. And I'm talking about Lincell. Now, Lincell was the first company in Kenya to build electric tricycles for persons with disabilities, mobility disabilities, especially wheelchair users, to move freely in outdoor spaces. As you might imagine, this is important because most of our public transport is not accessible. So even for shorter distances, it is a big hassle for wheelchair users. Now, this company has adopted a model of innovation that is called frugal innovation. They recycle up to 90% of parts that is used to build this electric tricycle, including the battery itself, that is made up of lithium ion batteries that have been recycled from old laptop batteries. This company also provides local repair services, which again has been missing in Kenya and in most developing countries. I want to finish by just letting you know who our partners are and also inviting you, should you want to continue building the inclusive innovation ecosystem in Africa. So we work with the Global Disability Innovation Hub, and our partners include ICT Norway, Kilimanjaro Blind Trust Africa, and our work has been made possible by funding from FCDO and NORAD. Thank you very much for your attention, and it was my pleasure to share this with you.
Thank you so much, Bernard. Loved learning more about the ecosystem in Africa from you. Equally, as I'm thinking of similar markets, and all markets really, we know that high costs for both purchasing and maintenance can really restrict access to assistive technology. Vidya, the two organizations that you work for, Vision Empower and Vembi Technologies, have been deeply committed to this space. Can you please share more about what the organizations you're working with are doing?
Yes. So first, I'd like to share a little bit about my journey because that was the motivation for the work we do. I am blind since birth, and I was born in rural India. In rural India and most rural parts of many countries in the global south, what happens is when firstly, there are not enough resources for people with disabilities. There's a lot of stigma towards disabilities, and by the time a child goes to school, it's already too late for most of the children, and that's what happened with me because the initial few years is going and trying to restore the eyesight or to fix the disability with a hope of getting a cure. Now, I was enrolled into a blind school only in grade 2. So by then, the foundational years are already lost. So when I went to the blind school, I started noticing a pattern that everybody told us to sing, they told us to do so many other things. But when it came to math and science, it was believed that math and science is not for persons with visual impairment for sure, because these subjects are taught in a very visual way. So till I was in the school, I just learned basics of math. And when I shifted to a regular school, the challenges only got magnified in grade 8. So when I would go to class and sit, there would be a teacher drawing something on the board and explaining things like, look at this, this is the digestive system. Or look at this, I mean, these are the parts of the cell. Or multiply these two and you get 20. So I could only hear the teacher point at something and say this and that. And I wouldn't understand anything in school because it was taught in a very visual way. Now, if I were to summarize the challenges, there were few main challenges. Firstly, there's not enough content in accessible format. As I told you, diagrams are just to be imagined because they're not accessible. And there are not enough special educators or teachers who can teach these subjects to children with visual impairment because they are not trained in these. And there are technologies that are assistive technologies that are available in the world, but they're not affordable for most people in countries like India because most of the people with disabilities live below the poverty line. Now, there were so many sleepless nights throughout my student days, but I continued studying these subjects, especially I continued studying math till my post-graduation. And many people are not so fortunate. Just to give you an idea of the magnitude of the problem, we have about 2.2 billion visually impaired people in the world. And India has the largest number of blind people. That's 1/3 of the world's blind population is in India. So in this generation, we have about 0.24 million children in the school-going age group. And that's just this generation, and so many generations have gone by, but you would be surprised to know from the secondary data, whatever we found, less than 50 students have studied STEM subjects beyond high school because of all the problems that I mentioned. Because of this huge gap that is there, I thought, why not start my own organization called Vision Empower, specifically to address this very same issue to make STEM education accessible for children who are visually impaired. And that's how we started Vision Empower in 2017. So when we started, we realized very early on that just one solution, just a technology is not going to solve the problems, all the problems that I mentioned. So we have a host of solutions that we have. Firstly, as I told you, content is not accessible. So we make content available and accessible. So we have content like 3D models wherever necessary. We have 2D images that are in braille, which visually impaired children can touch and feel. So everything that is available for a person with sight is available for visually impaired students also through touch and feel. So nothing is lost or nothing the child is missing. Secondly, we have our teacher training programs where we periodically conduct teacher trainings to fill in whatever knowledge gap that is already existing among the blind teachers because they themselves haven't studied these subjects, math and science. And also for teachers who can see, even they need to be trained on methods of teaching STEM subjects. So we have another project which is computational thinking for visually impaired students. This is right from the very beginning. This is in collaboration with Microsoft. And in this project, we teach basics of numeracy. Everything is taught through play. So we have our own braille cards and tools that we have designed. So the children play and pick up numerical skills. And this project is really popular among all the schools. And we have volunteer programs, we have experiential camps where the children are given hands-on experience on science and math learning. And also, as I mentioned, technologies are very necessary, but they're not affordable. So we have our own technology. We have two technologies. One is Suboda, which is our learning management platform, and the other is Hexis Antara solution, which I'll be talking more about. What we realized is at Vision Empower, we were not able to manufacture and scale up our technology. So we started our own another for-profit organization called Wemby Technologies in 2020. Now, the first solution that we are focusing on is the Hexis Antara solution. Basically, at Wemby Technologies, we make affordable assistive technologies for children with visual impairment. And once when I went to school, I started noticing something. So whenever we would tell the children orally, we would read out math verbal problem, the children were able to solve it well. But whenever we gave the problem in braille, they were not even able to solve because the problem was not with math skills, but the problem was with reading. Now, when we saw what was the root cause for this, so we realized that braille books are first of all really bulky and the children cannot carry them around. Secondly, braille embossers are so costly and printing braille books takes so much manual effort that the children don't even have textbooks. There's one copy and that copy is only with the teacher. And countries like India where so many regional languages are there, children cannot even get content in regional languages. Because of all of these, the literacy skills itself of the children were so weak. And this is when we decided to design our own solution, which is a braille book reading solution. So I'll explain a bit about this. So we have a software platform, which is called Antara. Now, whenever you upload any content onto Antara, it can be downloaded on our hardware device, which is Hexis. And once you download the whatever content from the software, it can be instantly available and read in braille. Basically, any book in any language can be instantly read in braille, no more waiting for the book forever, So all these problems that I mentioned can be solved easily through this device. And we have already tested this solution with so many students. And again, Microsoft AI for Accessibility is helping us in this in a very big way. Now, currently, we are working with about 12 states and 480 teachers. We are working in about 100 schools as of now. And you can also see some of the pictures that are there. So I represent Vision Empower in various forums, national and international forums, and talk about creating awareness, especially no one is very much aware that STEM education is such a big issue, so we're trying to create awareness. And I've also received some of the awards, including the National Award from the President of India. So you have all the pictures that are there on this slide. So if we really can't do all of this by ourselves, we need lot more people to partner with us and collaborate with us. So you can always reach us. You can visit our website, visionempowertrust.org, or wembi.in, vembi.in. You can also mail us at contact@wembi.in or outreach.ve@gmail.com. So these are our contact details. And just to conclude, we are putting all of these as a package and taking it to school. So Vision Empower and Wembi Technologies are working together, because just giving a technology will just be put on shelves and no one's going to use. So we need proper deployment mechanism to make all of these work. So it's a holistic solution where all the interventions are given to schools as a package, and we continuously follow up with teachers and students to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vidya. I found myself nodding so much as you were talking, and I'm very happy that the organizations you're working with are pushing the needle in terms of accessibility for students in such an important subject, which is STEM. Now, talking of STEM, Steve, from a research perspective, we know there are many elements to build technology that we must consider. So how are we thinking and approaching all of these complexities?
Thank you, Joanna. Yeah, actually, I think in a way I'll start by sort of summarizing what we've covered so far in this session, I think, by referring to what I think of as the 4 A's of assistive technology. So we've heard, of course, how important it is to have these alternative solutions. Over 1 billion of us have some kind of disability or special accessibility need, and it's clear we need a huge variety of alternatives to provide support that best suits each of us individually, that makes solutions that are appropriate. And even that's not enough. We need solutions that are adaptable or adjustable, so they can be fine-tuned to our individual needs. And even highly adaptable solutions aren't any good unless they're readily available too. They need to be easy to get hold of no matter where in the world we live. And of course, in particular, they need to be affordable. And finally, it's no good having these solutions unless people know about them. That there needs to be awareness of what's available. So we've already heard some compelling stories about the potential of assistive technologies, especially when they meet these requirements. But in case you're not quite convinced yet how important this really is, I've got one more example. It's on the screen now. The humble QWERTY keyboard. Designed for the mass market, of course, it's not particularly an assistive device, but this means that keyboards are pretty widely available. They're not particularly adaptable, certainly not physically, but if you're using Latin characters and you don't have a particular accessibility need, that doesn't matter, right? The regular QWERTY keyboard clearly lets people enter text pretty efficiently and very freely. Well, you'd think so. But 10 years ago, researchers noticed that as a society, we're increasingly showing a preference for words with more letters from the right-hand side of the keyboard, if you can believe it. So language is evolving, it always has. But since the introduction of the QWERTY keyboard, we're using more words that are typed with our right hands. And this research, and there's a couple of references on the screen, show that even such a subtle thing as where the keys ended up on a QWERTY keyboard makes a difference to how willing people are to use those letters. So thinking about assistive technologies for input, it's even more clear how important it is to have alternatives that are themselves adaptable and, of course, readily available in order to minimize friction, right, and make the interaction as free-flowing as possible. Thankfully, there are already alternatives to QWERTY keyboards. The photo on the screen shows a couple of the new Microsoft adaptive accessories in use. These connect to your computer and can be adjusted to work in different ways to suit different people depending on specific tasks and accessibility needs. Other companies supply yet more alternatives. A couple of examples on the screen are AbleNet who have been making a wide range of buttons for computer input for many years, and Orbit Research, who have braille input and display products. But there are many others too. Now, if you've been involved in the design and production of devices like this, you probably, well, you'd understand just how much it goes into it. And if you haven't, I think you'd be amazed, because Microsoft's adaptive accessories, for example, wouldn't have happened without the skills and the passion, the time and energy of literally tens of people. Industrial design, electronics, mechanical, product management, manufacturing, construction, supply chain, packaging even. There are so many moving parts, so many different people are necessary, and it takes a lot of resource. So another approach that's been pretty successful is much more bottom-up, much more community-driven. And in this case, individuals and organizations like the ones on the screen create new alternative devices or adjust existing solutions, usually at pretty low cost, using some of the tools and parts available to makers these days, things like 3D printing, soldering, hand soldering electronic components, laser cutting. Some wonderful examples of assistive devices have come about this way, many of them co-designed with end users. And some of these would almost certainly never make sense for a company to manufacture. So we've got these two approaches. On the left, we have mass production in a commercial environment. And on the right, we have this more craft production by volunteers. Both of these approaches tend to be pretty adaptable. With the craft production, there are many more alternatives, and they can be pretty low cost if you have access to those volunteers I talked about with maker skills. Perhaps through one of those organizations I mentioned. But generally, it's the commercial products that are the most readily available. So at this point, you might be thinking, well, is there a middle ground? Can we somehow get the best of both worlds? What if we had new tools and new components that makers could use to build assistive devices, but which naturally resulted in those devices being more product-like? They'd be easier to produce and repair than today's prototypes, but without the baggage and the cost of high-volume electronics production. What if we could more easily co-design assistive solutions with the end users, the folks with the accessibility needs? So at Microsoft Research, we've been building a new way of working with electronics called JACDAC. JACDAC is all open source, and it lets you create new devices from low-cost electronic modules that simply plug together with easy-to-use cables. The way a new device operates is defined by writing a simple program, and this is done from a web browser, either using a text-based programming language like Python or a graphical programming style that's super easy to understand. We've been using JACDAC to build new assistive devices with the help of partners like Assistive Tech and IDEO in Shanghai. So this is a photo of Mishna on the left who can't use his left hand, and he's working with Rudy from Assistive Tech to prototype a finger-mounted button with JACDAC that he can use on his right hand while he's typing. And this next slide shows Jiayue actively coding a device that was co-created with her. So while it's early days for JACDAC, I wanted to share how it can support the co-design of alternative solutions that are themselves adaptable. In terms of availability, our first manufacturing partner, KittenBot, produces a kit of JACDAC components, and this works with a reprogrammable board called the BBC Microbit and the Microsoft MakeCode programming editor I showed before. I put links to these on the screen. Okay, so you might remember that I started out with the 4 A's of assistive technology, and so far I've only really talked about these 3. The last one, awareness, is just important, of course, and perhaps the hardest of all. Unfortunately, I don't think there are any magic answers here, but I do hope events like Ability Summit and sessions like this one will slowly raise awareness of the solutions, the growing number of solutions that are out there, the organizations that can help deliver them, and the technologies that make them work. So I hope that's been a useful perspective, these 4 A's of assistive technology. And that's where I'm going to end. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for sharing. I learned a great deal today, and I thank you for your experience and for your knowledge and for sharing it with us. As we're thinking of the future of assistive technology, from your perspective, what opportunities lie ahead, or what are you most excited about?
I think I'm really excited about the fact that today, assistive technology, disability inclusion is not only a grassroots conversation, but also a development agenda for the whole world. But I think what I would love to see more is doubling of efforts to ensure that we can meet the magnitude of the need. And I have this thoughts that I've been thinking about the idea for exponential inclusion. And that means that our efforts must meet the need exponentially for us to bridge the gap. Therefore, we need to continue investing in innovative initiatives that are bridging the gap for access to accessibility and assistive technology exponentially. And everyone has a role to play. Thank you.
So I'm really excited about the fact that there's almost a level playing field even for a person with disability, because if I were to imagine life of a person with blindness 40 years back, so I'm sure all the opportunities that are available now weren't available back then. Now we can make financial transactions on our own, we can book cabs on our own, we can do pretty much everything like any other person. So I'm very excited that it's almost a level playing field now. But one thing that we should be focusing on is that visually impaired community or the disability community should be involved right from the design stage itself, because accessibility is then afterthought. If a technology is already designed and then you're trying to include persons with disability, then a lot of work will have to be put in. But if you're involved right from the beginning, that can solve a lot more issues, because already there are so many technology advancements, and again, leaving out so many people is not such a good idea when everyone has so much potential. So I feel if we focus on that, then I'm very excited to get more and more technologies.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting reflecting on those two answers. Actually, if you take Vidya's optimism, look at the progress we've made in the last 40 years, and you kind of mix that up with Bernard's ambition, right, to look at exponential improvement going forward as well, and you combine that with the technology. Technology continues to progress. So can we leverage those advantages in technology, which are happening all the time, to meet Bernard's ambition and build on the progress we've made so far, and truly make it a level playing field?
Fantastic points. From my side, it's encouraging to see accelerators, nonprofits, startups, and other organizations support assistive technology innovation around the world. With the topics that we discussed, as well as thinking of a sustainable future, the opportunity for reach of assistive technology is not just it's not solely with innovators. It's pivotal, to include governments, policies, and overall to think of the system in which we can encourage a thriving business ecosystem. So I'm very excited for that. And for everybody who tuned in today, thank you so much. We hope you're excited about this as we are, and we hope you're part of the future of assistive technology. Thank you.
Microsoft. On-screen text from this session includes Bernard Chira, Bashiri, BCHIIRA at ucl.ac.uk. JACDAC, open source, aka.ms/JACDAC, JACDAC.